Good evening. How are you? Hope you're having a wonderful Monday afternoon or wherever you are, whatever day it may be or time. I know on the West Coast, most of you are still just starting to go to work, but I hope you're going to enjoy your day anyhow. I just got some breaking news on some stuff that came over the wire about the elections, and I'm going to just hand it over to the reports, and there's a couple of other things as well.
All right, we have some breaking news out of the Supreme Court for you. The Supreme Court looking at a number of really consequential cases, and we have a decision on one. I want to bring in Ilya Shapiro. Ilya, you are the director of the Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies, and you're joining us. This case has to do with the Electoral College, and I'm going to kind of ask you to not just break down the case, but I think people may not completely understand the role of the electors and what they can and cannot do. So can you kind of give us a little bit of a definition as well?
Sure. Well, the Electoral College, as we've probably come to learn in the last 20 years, is the way we elect the president. It's not simply the winner of the national popular vote. Each state has the same number of electors as their combined representation in Congress, so senators plus House members. And D.C. also gets 3 electors. Now, these are supposed to be the voices, the votes of the people of that state when they're choosing the president. But in our history, we have had faithless electors, what's called, meaning those who have pledged to support, say, the Democratic nominee, but then go off and vote for someone else. And that, in fact, is what happened in 2016. 7 electors across several states declined to vote for either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, who won their respective states' popular vote, and voted for other people. The states of Washington and Colorado sanctioned such deviations, such faithlessness. And so the issue before the Supreme Court was whether states can indeed enforce the pledges of these electors to vote for the assigned party nominee that they're supposed to. 32 states have some sort of pledge laws like that, and 15 of them, including Washington and Colorado, as I said, enforce them with some kind of sanction. Well, today, the unanimous Supreme Court ruled that states can enforce their pledge laws, can punish people or replace electors or fine them if they don't vote for the nominee of the party that won their state. It's a unanimous opinion. Slight split on exactly why, with Thomas and Gorsuch saying it's sort of reserved to the states, whereas Justice Kagan and the rest of the majority said it's part of the Article 2 power for electing the president. But regardless, unanimous decision, states can punish electors that deviate from their state popular vote.
And so I ask you a little bit to explain, partially because, you know, we are on the air all over the world, 80 plus countries, and people may not be aware of the fact that here there is a difference between the popular vote, that it's not the popular vote leads directly to the president. There are a couple of steps in between, and so I wanted you to clarify that. And so when you read the decision of the justices, does it appear as if this is the last conversation on the topic, or is there legal wiggle room?
It's pretty clear. This is the thing. We've had faithless electors in our history many times. They've never been decisive in electing a president, but of course, ahead of the 2020 election, if it's going to be as close as it was last time, this is an important issue. And the court spoke decisively. And the whole opinion, including the Thomas Gorsuch concurrence, was 33 pages. I mean, very clear, very short, very logical opinion. Really no wiggle room. States don't have to punish their electors. They don't have to enforce their rules, and for that matter, Nebraska and Maine don't give all of their electoral votes to the winner of the state popular vote. They go by congressional district as well. So states do have options in terms of how they want to allocate their electoral votes. But once they've decided that, they can enforce that. The Supreme Court ruled today very clearly.
Okay, so before I let you go, I want to ask you about another case having to do with robocalls.
Yeah, that's the other case that was decided today. When the robocall prohibition to cell phones was enacted a number of years ago, there was an exception for government robocalls. That is, if the government tries to collect on your student debts or other debts that you might owe to the government, there was an exception. They could robocall your cell phone. Well, the court today ruled 7-2 that they cannot. That is, the exception is gone. The government stays in the same shoes as a private telemarketer or other debt collector. They cannot. If you said that, don't call me, then you cannot be robocalled in that way.
And then looking forward, we've sort of been on the edge of our seats because there are a number of big decisions that the court is expected to hand down decisions, a number of big cases rather, the president and his taxes. Give me sort of a list of the biggies that you're waiting to hear about.
Yeah, the presidential tax returns, subpoenas from a congressional committee and also from the Manhattan DA. Those might work differently. We'll have to see. The ministerial exemption, that is, religious organizations are exempt from employment discrimination laws if the person is a minister, a teacher, or a religious advocate of some kind, generally not applicable to, say, janitors or something like that, but we'll get a definition of how broad that is. Little Sisters of the Poor, the group of nuns that didn't want to be subject to the Obamacare contraceptive mandate. That still is rolling around in the courts, and the Supreme Court will decide how the administrative law works in that way. And the constitutionality of Oklahoma, or at least half of it, might revert to being an Indian territory or a reservation of some sort. Very important issue, certainly for that state, but also in terms of how we prosecute murderers or other criminals in that part of Oklahoma.
Whoa, that is fascinating. That's one that's flying below the radar. We're lucky to have you, Ilya. Thank you very much.
Happy to be here. I'll be here all week.
I'm going to give you a few perspectives.
Well, this was a case that we were watching and political people were very interested in. It had to do with the people who actually vote for the president in December, the people who make up what's known as the Electoral College. When you go to the polls in November, you're actually not voting for the actual candidates. You're voting for a slate of electors who meet in your state in mid-December and cast the actual vote for president. And the question before the Supreme Court was, when they meet in December, must they vote as the majority in their state did, or are they free agents? Can they vote for whomever they wish? And today the Supreme Court, in a unanimous ruling, said no, they're not free agents. They must vote according to the way the state apportions the votes. Now, in 48 of the states, all the electors vote for whoever won the popular vote in the state. In 2 other states, they follow the results of congressional district elections. But in all cases, the Supreme Court said the states can require them to vote according to the way the people did at the polls in their states. The challengers here had, I think, wanted to use this Supreme Court case to begin to undo the Electoral College, to sort of shift toward a more a popular vote, either a direct popular vote for president, or to have the electors follow the results of the nationwide results. So in any event, it's a unanimous ruling. It was an experiment that was interesting for a while. The only change that this makes is in the states of the 10th Circuit out west, because one of the people who was a faithless elector in the last presidential election was from Colorado, and he actually won. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeal said, yes, the electors can be chosen however the state wants, the parties in the state wants, but once they show up on election day to be presidential electors, they are federal agents at that point, and the states can't tell them what to do. Well, that's now been overturned. So that ends what could have been a big drama for this coming presidential election. Well, this was a case that we were watching, and
so there you have it. One Supreme Court ruling. There is a couple of other things I just caught, and that is the breaking news from Breaking 911. Jeffrey Epstein's confidant, Maxwell, en route to Manhattan, soon to be held in the same prison where Jeffrey Epstein died. I still say that it's still a possibility he's alive. I can't believe they would allow an important witness like this be not secure. He just has too much information. She has way too much information to be negligent. And let's say, we kind of lost the footage in the security office, or the guards fell asleep like they did before. It'd be kind of weird, wouldn't it? Coincidence? I'm just saying, Hopefully nothing happens to her. We need all the information we can get. She was mainly the one who lured the women to Epstein and to the island. And another little bit of news. Judicial Watch sues Joe Biden's Senate for his Senate record.
Judicial Watch has a new lawsuit for documents about Joe Biden, a new lawsuit for documents about the unmaskings, and as I was suggesting earlier, a new lawsuit trying to hold a leftist government here accountable to the rule of law on its First Amendment violations of Judicial Watch's rights tied to the protests. So I'll talk about that as well. So a lot going on. First up, though, is our big new lawsuit against the University of Delaware over its failure to turn over Biden documents from his time in the Senate to the American people. And specifically, Judicial Watch has filed a lawsuit in the state of Delaware on behalf of itself and our friends at the Daily Caller News Foundation. Now, we had asked for the records, not way back when, but earlier this year, back at April 30th of 2020. We had filed a FOIA request for documents about how this university was handling the Joe Biden documents. We want communications the university had with Vice President Biden about the records, and maybe even Senator Biden, who knows. And especially about the issue about the proposed release of records and how that was going to be handled. Our friends at the Daily Caller News Foundation asked for all the records. Where are all these records that this state-supported institution has about Joe Biden's time as a senator? What's interesting about this case is that as a senator, typically these records are hard to get because Congress, as you know, exempts itself. Maybe you don't know this, but you will be outraged to learn, perhaps, that Congress exempts itself from the Freedom of Information Act and other general records laws like that. But in turning these records over to the state-supported institution that is covered by the Freedom of Information Act, Senator Biden has made his records subject to public scrutiny. And so any agreements, side agreements, allegedly they have, in this case, the side agreement that is covered by the Freedom of Information Act. They wouldn't be released until he leaves office or basically doesn't. Let me see. Let me get the specific thing. Oh, excuse me. The university has said it will not release the records until 2 years after Biden has retired from public life. So when did he end? When did he stop being a senator? In 2004. So President Obama ran in 2008. So 2007, 2008. It's now 2020. Now Biden doesn't want any. Let's say he wins in November, and then he wins again the next November. 2028. So decades will pass before we be able to look at the senators, again, public records that are being maintained with taxpayer dollars. That can't be the case. So accordingly, we sued. They denied our request. They claimed without corroboration, this University of Delaware, that public funds are not used to support the Biden Center's senatorial papers. So why is it we want these documents? In many ways, because they're there, because these are documents that ought to be disclosed to the American people under law. And of course, there are all these controversies. You had this Tara Reid, who accused Biden of sexually assaulting her. She suggested that records about her complaints around the assault would be in his senatorial papers. And of course, Biden himself has admitted to communicating with Vladimir Putin and other foreign leaders when he was a senator. So what was he talking to Putin about? I mean, isn't that interesting to anybody? He's running for president. It doesn't mean that there will be scandalous records. Maybe Tara Reid will be shown to be having not told the truth. Maybe his communications with Vladimir Putin and other foreign leaders make him seem like a great man. Well, if so, why are they hiding the records? That's my question. So when you hide material, in many cases, not all the time, in many cases it's because you have something to hide, especially if the reason for hiding is really not lawful. And in the case of the University of Delaware, it's Delaware. Senator Biden, Vice President Biden, is a giant political figure there. When he was a senator for years and years and years, he was vice president. I'm sure he's a favorite son. So we can't let politics get in the way, though, in the enforcement of the rule of law. And so everyone's, what's incredible about this is that this man is running for president of the United States, and who is first to try to ask basic questions in court about what he did as a senator? Judicial Watch. I mean, he's been running, for a year now? And we're the only ones in court, with, of course, our friends at Daily Caller News Foundation. And I'm sure other news organizations have asked for the records, but no one sued. Again, it's Judicial Watch doing the basic heavy lifting for government accountability and just the rule of law on transparency issues. And again, we've got all of these issues about Joe Biden as a senator, but the sexual harassment complaint, Vladimir Putin, his handling of Supreme Court nominations. I mean, that's a big deal too. Remember, he ran the Thomas nomination? I mean, that was a wild abuse of Justice Thomas at the time. I'd like more information about that, more in particular as well. And so the University of Delaware should stop protecting Joe Biden and release the records. And of course, the vice president, he can just authorize the release of these records as well. There's nothing preventing him. Let's presume that there's this agreement. And let's presume that it has any validity under law. I don't think it does. He can just authorize the release of the records. 2 years after he retires, effectively that means we'll never see them. Or we'll see them at a point in time when it won't have any impact on our decision making related to our government. So that's why Judicial Watch is in court right now in the state of Delaware on behalf of Judicial Watch, obviously, and the Daily Caller News Foundation to find out the full truth about Senator Biden's record as a United States Senator. And it's just remarkable that we're the ones doing it, and no one else is. But that's Judicial Watch. That's welcome to our lives. This is what happens. We kind of end up doing the basic work that you would think the media would be doing, Congress would be doing, and others might be doing. But obviously, that's why it's such a wonderful thing that the law allows us to be able to do this work, because in any other country, most other countries don't have laws like this allowing access to the records. They just don't. And if they are, they're much more draconian in terms of being in favor of the government versus the people. And here we have this government accountability law that allows us to petition our government and hold it accountable as the Constitution provided for. And by darn it, we're going to use it to the hilt. We're going to use it to the hilt. Because our freedoms are at stake every day.
It really is, and it's people like that who are fighting really hard to get the answers, and they've done some very good progress as far as emails and so forth, even though the DOJ is still being buttholes, the FBI are being buttholes about actually releasing anything when it comes to Benghazi or whatever. But hey, they're in there. They're in for the fight, and they are helping us tremendously, keeping us informed. They are doing the heavy lifting. So let's all support Tom Fenton. He's an amazing man. So thank you for joining me. I wanted to bring you that breaking news about the Electoral College and a couple other things. God bless you. God bless the President, and Vice President, law enforcement. See, if you ever get a chance to talk to an officer, say thank you. I appreciate you so much. I'm sure it will make their day a little easier and better. So God bless you. I will see you around soon. This is Fighting for the Republic, and I will be on shortly. You never know. I am working on a specific time. Have a wonderful, fantastic